Hello, hello, hello. It's Hillary and Clinton, and welcome to another episode of Black Atlantic.
This week, we'll be talking about Policy 713 in New Brunswick that was undergoing review and some of our thoughts. Uh, an interesting story about African coded quilts in Nova Scotia. And we're going to hear a little bit about Hillary's trip in Italy and some shocking revelations she learned that made her feel very uncomfortable.
Is it a shocking revelation or am I just uneducated? We will find out in a minute. We are an East Coast podcast bringing Black stories to the world. You can follow us on all of the social media accounts that exist. We probably have it if it's out there. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, rate, do all of the fun
Yep.
things. And now, my first time experiencing our new intro. I out loud went, "Aww."
It's not bad. It's not bad. I like it. I like it. We're gonna have to have a new outro for next week as well.
Soon. Absolutely. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. The skies are blue. I've been spending lots of time outdoors, soaking in that vitamin D. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Same, sunny here. 24. I went to my local farmers market first thing this morning. Got some
Nice.
fresh veg to feel, more centered in my space. Wrote an article about someone who I hope will be a guest in the future, which is very exciting. The usual. Then I had a meeting with you, and now I'm having a recording with you, and it's a good day to be doing Black Atlantic. Hey.
Who's the possible future guest? Is this a secret?
It's not a
No,
secret.
it's obviously
Carlin
not.
Purcell of KDPM Consulting.
Hmm.
I know her whole story because I'm writing this article, but a wonderful woman who used to do banking in the islands and came to Canada for new job opportunities. And then, kept getting overlooked by the white man. And so she just, decided to go independent, do her own thing, and now does corporate teachings from an ancestral African cultural lens, because to teach leadership from a white perspective is not to teach the full scope of leadership. She sells a success planner, which is like a great journaling tool, which I actually bought for a friend recently. And it's just absolutely lovely in the sphere of growth, personal development, psychological, warfare and mental warfare in these white spaces, and trying to create a culture around all these things. She taught me about the African medicine wheel, which I thought only the indigenous people had a medicine wheel. I learned so much from my hour chat with her. She's absolutely wonderful and would like to be on the show.
Oh yeah, I think you told me about her. And
Did.
time and time again, I've found that, it's an example of through bad things come good. I've heard so many stories of people of color not getting opportunities or hired for jobs, and so they had to become independent entrepreneurs. And
Mm-hmm.
this is another example of that. And it's
Yeah,
something great from bad because we're both entrepreneurs, and I think we both think entrepreneurship is a great thing. But all these
absolutely.
people who created these beautiful things, they may not have had that opportunity to do that had they not been victims of that kind of
Yeah.
oppression.
I think entrepreneurial spirit comes from the necessity of forging a path for yourself. And I think she talks
Mm.
about it in the sense in the article. She talks about it in the framework of, this is the path my ancestors gave me. They gave me the skills to have an entrepreneurial spirit. I was never meant to be bogged down by the corporate world or held to these rules necessarily, in a place, in a space where these people don't even understand me, how I'm showing up, or where I come from. So she sees it as so much of a blessing, power to her, being in her higher self, showing up as her higher self. She, I don't think, would at any point say dang, I wish I still worked for corporate banking. She seems to be just, enjoying and living her best life. But yeah, a lot of that in entrepreneurial spirit comes from being shot down first. And look at us all
Interesting.
thriving. Look at us all.
Amen. Amen. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the show. I'll talk about the first topic because I think the next two are going to be spearheaded mostly by you. If I'm making any mistakes in the way I describe this, please interject. Don't feel afraid to interrupt. But For those of you who don't know, in the province of New Brunswick, it's been all over the news and media for the past 2 weeks that a policy of theirs that relates to the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development is under review. Now, what policy is that? That is policy 713, and that has to do with sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, this policy was only put in place on August 17th, 2020. And usually, when policies are reviewed by the government, those policies will have already been in place for about 10 to 15 years. However, it's been less than 3 years, and here we are with them reviewing policy 713. When they announced that they were going to review it, they were very vague and they didn't give any information as to what they were reviewing. Now, this created, for understandable reasons, outcry among populations all across New Brunswick, from parents as well as from students. There were protests, demonstrations, school walkouts, rallies in support of this. Multiple news media organizations picked it up. And to add insult to injury, when Blaine Higgs was interviewed about it, he really dropped the ball in terms of revealing, a lot of his personal opinions on sexual orientation and gender identity, and not actually sticking to what the policy's spirit was supposed to be about. He was captured going into topics such as drag shows for children. Um, I can't remember the other things, but things that didn't have to do with the policy. And go ahead.
I'm just gonna say it's like it's drag story time, so not a drag show for kids, because the drag story times are like drag queens reading children's books to children, whereas a drag show for kids would probably be a problem. That one I think might actually be a concern to some people, but this is definitely not necessarily a full-on like performance. It's very much just like, yay.
And it doesn't. Thank you, Hillary. It doesn't relate, especially because people dressed in drag reading stories to children don't happen in public schools. And what this policy was about a public school policy. That typically happens in a public library where people have the choice whether or not they want to bring their children to that. No one is forcing that upon them. Now, if that is something that was happening in schools, I think that would be a subject. Like everyone has a right to feel equal and have a say in their children's education. And if there were parents who didn't want their children to be exposed to that, that would be a separate conversation, but that has nothing to do with this policy. So this policy is policy 713, and again, it has to do with sexual orientation and gender identity in school. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up today, and I'd like to share the screen for a moment.
Well, you share this screen. I already want to correct myself because I recently had a conversation with the only Black drag queen actually in New Brunswick who I want us to have on the show. And I should correct myself in saying that there are drag performances that are safe for kids and great for kids because they are not necessarily sexualized. And that there is a whole stigma and a problem with the idea that drag performances are sexualized, which is why there is all this pushback about the drag story time for kids. That being said, it is not a dance routine that is being shown to these kids at the library, and it has nothing to do with the schools. I just want to correct myself. I don't want us to get canceled because I made a mistake. There is appropriate drag. It does exist. Sorry. As you
Yeah,
were.
yeah. I mean, I was confused about that topic as well at first because I myself thought that this was taking place in schools, and so even myself I questioned, is this okay? It turns out it's not taking place in schools, and it turns out it is not like a drag show that you would see at a bar in a nightclub at night. We wouldn't have any problem with kids don't typically like clowns, but if there was a clown coming into a school wearing makeup, did I say something wrong
No,
now?
I'm just laughing.
No, but I mean it's a costume, right?
Yes.
Right. It's someone wearing a costume. So if they're like sick kids hospital, sometimes again, I don't know why they use clowns because kids are afraid of clowns, but if a clown went into a hospital to cheer up a kid and something, we wouldn't have a problem with that. So all in all, Blaine Higgs made a big deal of that, which got him in additional heat, because this policy has nothing to do with that. This policy has to do with sexual orientation and gender identity in school. Um, Now, they later came out and said that no, they're not revoking the policy. Um, this policy is not going to be canceled or anything like that. They were looking at policies like 615, where all students will be able to participate in curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular activities that are safe, welcoming, consistent with their gender identity. I won't get into this, but Blaine Higgs was saying, like, if a 17-year-old male who identifies as a female, should they be allowed to participate in school sports on the female team, and is that unfair, or is there a disadvantage and stuff like that? Now, there's lots of data to say that women can perform just as good as men in sports, and I believe that. I also I won't get into that. I was going to say genetically men do tend to be naturally stronger, but that doesn't mean that a woman can't perform as well as a male in sports. And the other thing that they are reviewing is policy 6.3.2, which, Hillary, if you'll interject again for a second before I want to bring up why I brought this up today. Just
Sure.
explaining this one, because you explained it so much better than me.
Sure. So in reading it, it basically says anyone transgender or not, or any transgender or non-binary students under the age of 16 will require parental consent in order for their preferred first name to be officially used for record keeping purposes. Before contacting a parent, the principal must have the informed consent from the student to discuss their preferred name with the parent. And I'll be honest, who explained it the best is actually CBC, because they love to understand their audience and what they understand. The way that CBC New Brunswick shared it is essentially that Premier Blaine Higgs confirmed his main issue with the policy is that it says if a child under 16 wants an informal name change or pronoun change, teachers are required to get the consent of the child before telling their parents. Parents still have to sign off on any formal changes like a report card change. So if it's an informal change, a kid can say to a teacher, I prefer to be called Samantha versus Sam, or I prefer to go by they, them pronouns, and that should be fine informally. If the teacher wants to escalate that to a parent for an informal change, then they actually have to ask the child if that is okay. And all of this, being a person who identifies as queer and has a ton of queer people in their life, is to keep the child safe in case there are people at home who are going to abuse them or not okay with them identifying as they do, and it's trying to keep them safe. But a parent would still need to sign off on anything formal like a report card or any type of school record. So while they can ask the child permission, they would still have to go to a parent for anything official, anything informal. They actually have to ask the kid the consent to approach the parent.
And so
Voila.
Blaine Higgs wanted to change it so that they could always tell the parent at any time. Sorry, I
Yes.
don't want to say what he wanted to change it to, but they're reviewing this because he seems to disagree, and he thinks that
He confirmed
uh,
that's his issue.
the teachers and the schools should be able to talk to the parents about anything.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so for obvious reasons, for religious reasons, or just for tolerance reasons, or whatever reasons that could put children in danger. When I heard about this, I was saying, yeah, like if it can be confirmed that the child would be in danger if the parents were contacted, then you have to protect the children and the parents shouldn't be contacted. But I think resources and money should be spent towards really investigating that further, which is not mentioned in this policy. I think sometimes children are afraid to come out to their parents for fear of how their parents will respond to their child. But when the child does come out to their parents, the child is met with nothing but love and affection. So if anything was going to be changed in this, I think there should be additional money spent in terms of counseling and investigating to see why the child is afraid. And because if the school could help the child come out in a positive way, it may actually strengthen the bond at home between parents and children. And I am well aware that in other cases, it would actually tear families apart and possibly have kids kicked out of their homes and stuff like that.
Well, and that's the thing too, when you say something like that, like I can't imagine a safe way to have a guidance counselor investigate in that way. And I also know that at least I perceive it, that like a lot of people in the queer community, like it's so,
Hmm.
their coming out stories are so personal to them. It's
Hmm.
riddled with so much trauma and guilt and shame and feelings and so many different things for some people, that I would worry that, one, someone just might not want the outside support or influence, and so you're investing money in a resource that, like, how are you're not going to force the kid to come out as gay to the guidance counselor to use the resource, so they might be a null and void investment. And then furthermore, it
Hmm.
might actually propagate, like, I would worry, thinking about my own home situation, I would worry that parents would lie to the people in charge and say, oh no, I absolutely love that Sam now wants to be Samantha, that Hillary now wants they, them pronouns, etc. And then at the home is like literally beating the shit out of them. Like I my mother literally does not believe in bisexuality. I have never come out to my mom. My
Okay.
family does not support like I don't know that all of my family supports queerness. So I would worry though, knowing my family, that they would lie to the people. Like you'd have to be so careful about that investment and have it not be wasted. Granted, I know where your point
Okay.
is going and I support where you're headed in this conversation.
That's fair. No, that's fair. I don't profess to know what's best for any of this. Where I'm going in the conversation, now that we've explained it to anyone who doesn't know, is that policies like this are important. They need to be protected and they need to be kept in place. However, during my research of this, I started wondering, like, what other policies are in place to protect children in New Brunswick, and I found three other ones. So there is this one. This is Policy 701, Policy for the Protection of Pupils, to protect students against physical, sexual, emotional abuse, and then also, it gives examples of abuse, discriminatory behavior based on race, color, religion, um, other reasons, as well as sexual orientation and sex. So there is already a policy in place to protect children based on sexual orientation, to prevent them from abuse. And I know this doesn't highlight the relationship with the parents, but I'm getting to that. And then I kept looking, and there is a policy 703 that is about having a positive learning and working environment, and the same thing. Um, the purpose of this policy is to provide and foster a positive learning environment for children of multiple backgrounds in which they may be persecuted, again, race, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation. So that's a second policy for the protection of a wide variety of issues. There's a third one that has to do with bullying. That's, I believe, policy inclusive. There is one for bullying as well, which I don't have up, but there's inclusive education. And inclusion has to do with all children feeling included and equal and able to experience all of the same things in school on a day-to-day basis. And inclusion also cites things like race, gender identity, sexual orientation. So there was already three policies in place, designed to help, among other students, children based on their sexual identity and sexual orientation. Um, and then there's policy 713, which is important because it expands on the gender identity and sexual orientation of kids in school. But I got to wondering, is there or has there ever been a policy in place written to protect visible minorities and children of color? So I reached out to our friend and colleague, Matthew Martin, president of Black Lives Matter New Brunswick, over in St. John, who does a lot of amazing work in the province. And I asked him um, if he was aware of any policy in New Brunswick dedicated to ensuring children of color and visible minorities are specifically protected from hate, racism, or anything of the sort. And he came back with a very matter of fact, no, nothing. He said there was one being drafted for schools, but there's nothing, and that he was working on a policy for the city of Fredericton, but nothing came of it. And again, he said most times in school settings, they'll just refer to policy 701 about the safe school policy, but they're not specific to anything, and they're very general. Um, And that really upset me and that really bothered me, because throughout our years of podcasting and through just talking to parents of children, whether they be Korean, East Indian, Filipino, and of course Black, um, all of these parents, or Middle Eastern, all of these parents have stories of their children being harassed, attacked, bullied, made to feel uncomfortable, um, subject of hatred, slurs, and again, literally violently attacked in schools in New Brunswick, and nothing is ever done about it, ever. Um, Principals and teachers don't have policies in place that set guidelines to say what they can do about it. We know teachers are very restricted nowadays. I know kids in school, they can swear, they can act. It's not like back in the day where teachers had the authority to punish, and I don't mean physically, but punish students. And there's nothing in place for racialized children who have been experiencing racism since you were a child in New Brunswick, Hillary, and they continue to, even in 2022, 2023. I know personally of kids who were chased down the street in Petitcodiac with a knife, saying, "You're going to die, N-word." Call the N-word in group chats and stuff, and said that they should be killed. I know of children who have had their hair set on fire in the 2020s, and there's no policy to protect these children. And so the reason I'm bringing this up today is, where is it? And for all the people out there protesting, protest, make sure policy 713 is protected, but like keep that same energy for racialized children. I know there are people working on these policies. Support those people. Reach out to Black Lives Matter New Brunswick. Take to the streets like you did in 2020. Make sure that all children are protected. If you want all children to be protected, we need to protect all children. And that's why I wanted to bring this up today. And that's my breakdown of it. And please, what are your thoughts as well?
Well, you know that I completely agree. I believe that policy 713 should not be revised. I don't know what they would change. I think it should stay the way that it is. I don't think that it should be removed in any way, shape, or form. I fully believe that it is keeping kids safe. I do believe that more needs to be done to keep all kids safe, all of the colors, orientations of the wind. I think that how do I word this? This isn't playing devil's advocate, but I think that some of the issues that are still at hand as to why there isn't something like this for BIPOC kids, let's say, is that they're in my favorite person, Manju Varma's report for systemic racism. One of the recommendations was an increase in representation in Black staff, and that doesn't exist. I remember being in high school and knowing what staff was gay. I knew which teachers of mine actually were queer. And that's a representation that I did not have in terms of my Blackness, in terms of Black queerness, in terms of Black Acadianness. And I am in no way, shape, or form, I want to make this so clear, saying that any of this is a negative. But there are people in power who can support these kids because they were once these kids. It feels to me like there are not enough people in leadership roles that are Black that can advocate for a Black policy other than the Black Lives Matter New Brunswicks and the Prudes and these organizations that are grassroots, local, and community. Because I still don't know that there are really that many Black staff. I know that Akeem, who was with formerly Three Kings Moving, now Queens and Kings Moving, was a Black teacher at Queen Elizabeth School, but was one of the only ones ever, and that was recently. I know, speaking to my former high school teachers, that to get materials approved that speak to racism, I'll say, because that was our discussion, it takes years. It took 2 years to be able to talk about George Floyd in a way that had been like a peer-reviewed journal, because you can't talk about what's on Twitter while the kids are seeing what's on Twitter. So how can you have a movement and advocate for policies keeping Black kids safe when you can't talk about the things that harm the Black kids in the first place because of the school district? You and I are building the curriculum that will talk about Black histories in a safe way, and in a good way. And maybe that will be the next thing to bring on the policy. And I don't know that there's anything about queer histories, but it seems to me like there's enough teachers, people in power, educators that can speak to their own experience, that probably fosters a good sense of community and at least some safety for these kids that does not, I think, exist for Black kids. We were talking privately before this episode, and when I referenced some of the social supports listed in policy 713, it does literally ask for people to be sort of like safe spaces for these queer students and having a gender alliance so that kids know who they can go to about these things. I know from speaking with Matthew Martin that through the funding with the John Howard Society, they have Black liaisons in some schools.
Yeah.
And I know from speaking with my high school teacher that they are only supporting kids that are labeled as like Black troubled youth, not just Black youth, not just people who are going through something. And I might be completely wrong. I know that they're doing more in terms of like resumes, job building, things like that. But you can't just be a Black kid who heard the N-word and at Harrison Turnbull High School find another person, from my understanding, that can relate to that experience and support you, or else why are they calling me 2 provinces away? So if we still have this problem, how are we supposed to get to a place where policy can be built? And again, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be all of the supports for the queer students. There should be all the supports for all of the students, for all of their differences, so that there is just a collective sense of safety overall. And again, as I said earlier when I was talking about the drag story time, speaking to their drag name is Norman, speaking to him, and I want him to be on the show. He's the only person I know with a platform who's a Black gay in the whole province of New Brunswick. So what about the Black gay kids? Who do they get to talk to? So there's just so many layers to this in terms of who these policies protect and what policies need to be implemented for kids who aren't being protected. And I think a lot of it boils down to, and again, referencing the systemic racism report, the people in charge literally said they did not understand systemic racism. How are they going to build a policy that protects kids from being chased down the street and being called the N-word if the people who make the policy don't think systemic racism is a thing that exists? If you'll remember, part of that story also involved a teacher saying you didn't have to like Black people, but you had to be nice to them. We have teachers who say these outlandish things. When are we building policies? Like, you would not, I don't think you would have a white teacher say like the F slur, or say you don't have to like the LGBTQ2SIA plus community, but you have to be nice to them. Like, what? It's abhorrent in both circles of this Venn diagram. There's a policy for one half of the Venn diagram.
Yeah, wow, that's a good point. And those are amazing insights. So
I didn't think I was going to get on this soapbox when we were texting earlier, but I am on the soapbox.
Yeah, no, you didn't bring up those points earlier, and those were great and insightful and all factual. So, I mean, all I'm saying is that, after the protests and the riots, the work had to be done. And a lot of work has been done, but there's no policy in place to protect visible minorities. And I'm not just talking about Black kids, I'm talking about all visible minorities. We need to get on that, and we need to just keep that same energy that we're seeing in the media right now to make sure all kids are protected, because there's just no protections for them.
I want to add too, though, that when I was having that conversation with Norman, a similar thing came to mind, in the sense that, like, when George Floyd was horrendously murdered and we all came together for that, it happened because of the media. And if you look at America right now and you look at the media, they're trying to ban drag in Tennessee and in Florida, and they're vilifying queers and excuse me, they're killing people for being gay. And so then you have Canada as a response questioning these policies and doing sort of as much harm as Canada can, because we're not as aggressive. But to me, it's always a response to media. It's like, you know what? I hear someone say something and I finally agree with that, so I'm going to get on my soapbox and now I'm going to challenge this policy. So then you get all of these people who come together. And so it's hard, because what I was sort of asking Norman about, and Carlin as well in my interview, all of the Black people, I've been asking them, how do you have a resurgence of a movement without there being an atrocity in the media to cause the movement to come back? How do you make people care about Black people again? Because people care about the gays right now because people are killing the gays. Why do we have to die for someone to give a fuck? That is literally what I said to Norman. And I don't want that. So I want everyone who's hearing your point to get on the soapbox about this movement without there needing to be an atrocity. You don't have to be, no one has to die for us to build this policy for visible minority children. Just also, like, asterisk, think of them too. Think of all the kids. That's all.
Wow. No, another good point. Like, yeah, we shouldn't have to have someone murdered for this to become an issue. I know back during the Black Lives Matter protests, there also emerged a sub hashtag of Black Trans Lives Matter, and that was okay. It was great. It's bringing it into the conversation. So now I'm just saying, while we're focusing on this, let's bring the other aspect into the conversation, the fact that there's no policy that it exists to protect visible minorities. And I also think you're right. I also think the way the government brought this up, although they don't need to do a review of the policy, but it was very irresponsible because right now people are afraid. There's all this stuff in the media about all these laws being redacted in the States going back to like literal Jim Crow era type laws, and also used to oppress all people. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Well, let us know what you think. Oh, I was going to say,
I have one more thought, and I was sort of afraid to say it because it's a bit controversial.
That's okay. We are supposed to be an uncensored podcast.
You have no idea I'm about to say this. But, I think that your point is sort of the point that Dave Chappelle was trying to make in his special, but because it came across as transphobic, it was so horrifically shot down. And at the time, and I still do not agree with the way that Dave Chappelle positioned all of it, but at the end of the day, the main joke that he made that I found funny was, do Black people have to get oiled up and in booty shorts for people to care? And I'm not saying that is great, but there is a difference between people accepting and caring about the queer community because some of them are still white and not the same vibe for the Black people. And I hate that that's a fact, but it is. And that's all I have to say about that.
Hey, that is all good. I mean, we are an open show where we're uncensored and we state our mind. And
I will add,
I mean, I don't think he hates trans people. I won't get into it either. I don't think Dave Chappelle hates trans people. I think he felt neglected by the LGBTQ community, which I'm now seeing parallels between what I'm saying in the show.
Yes, but I will say, in like a question that I have for Norman that I want to extrapolate on in our podcast and in the actual like write-up that I'm going to do about him, is the fact that a lot of people love the queer Acadian community, which is white, and have celebrated them on CBC with like a drag ball acadienne and all of these things. There isn't as much love for him as the sole Black drag performer of New Brunswick. And we could blame it on statistics. You're only highlighting one person. Okay. But really, I do think that sometimes race comes into play with the acceptance and of queerness. Sometimes I think more people are more readily willing to accept white queer people because they still understand the color of their skin, but they don't understand maybe Black queer people because it's just too far removed. We know that hip hop has had a lot of hatred and issues with Black gay people. And so I think that all of those things do come into play when you extrapolate on this conversation at a macro lens. But I do just think that, like, just to throw it out there, I would like to assume in his heart of hearts and good intentions, all Dave Chappelle wanted to say was, hey, can we have some of the pie? It's a conversation we've been having for years on other podcasts. Can Acadians share the pie? Can queer people share the pie? Can any white person in power share the pie with the Black people who want some of the pie, or any visible minority? That's the main, I think, argument. It's just then he said some jokes that were harmful, I think, to the queer community. I will stand by that as well as a member of. But the pie, can we have it? Are we gonna get canceled? This was the whole episode. This was it.
that's facts. That's what like what you're
That's
saying.
facts.
No, like I agree with what you're saying. Like we didn't discuss this before the episode, and
Yeah.
you're really making me think. And like we always say, that's why we love doing this because we make each other think, and we talk to guests who make us think and teach us things. And we want to know what you think. We want to know what you think in the comments. So when you see our episode, when you see our teasers, if you see any posts about this, let us know your opinions. Let's have a discussion about it in the chats. Like let us know what your opinion on policy 713 is. Let us know if you think that all visible minority children need to be protected, especially with people coming from all over the country and immigrating from all over the world. Why aren't these policies in place? Let us know what you think about Dave Chappelle. Has Hillary given you any food for thought? Is your interpretation of what Dave Chappelle did any different? Let us know. I think that's the show.
I was gonna say I feel bad that we teased some of the other things and we didn't
We
bring them up. I can
we could
quick.
talk about them next week.
It's your call. I mean,
Let's
the
get
Italy
let's get
thing
in.
will stay in my mind.
Let's get into it. Let's get some extra Patreon style goodies for the people. This could be if we had a Patreon, which we might create. This could be extra content, but
Yes.
let's do it. Let's talk about. This is actually a really interesting story. I know you have to go though, so that's why I was trying to
No,
wrap it up.
yeah,
But
I've got a quick few moments, but yeah, stitching
all right.
together a history of quilting in African Nova Scotia communities. 60 quilts created and inspired
I'll
by
also
members.
let's just say who it's by.
Oh,
Another
our
colleague
good
of
friend
ours.
Matthew
Yeah.
Byard, good
Yeah.
friend who sidebar nation very quickly. My baby brother coached his son's soccer last week, and I just got this random photo of my baby brother with Matthew's kid, and I
Oh,
hadn't
cute.
seen a photo of my brother in a minute, and I was like, oh my god. Anyway, I was proud of my brother, and I was excited.
I thought you were going to say when we started Black Atlantic, he was one of the first reporters to reach out to us and give us some and spread our
And
word out
I
there.
met him in person finally last month when I was in Halifax, so very
Oh,
lovely.
Nate. Okay.
Yeah, awesome.
Awesome. Okay.
60 quilts created and inspired by members of Nova Scotia's Black communities are currently on a national tour and on exhibit at the Confederation Centre of the Arts in Charlottetown, PEI. The Secret Codes African Nova Scotian Quilts is a collaboration between the Black Artists Network of Nova Scotia and the Vale Quilters Association, a group comprised of mostly Black women from the Vale Road area of New Glasgow and Nova Scotia's only incorporated guild of Black quilters. Traveling in all of these communities, rescuing quilts that had been sentenced to abasement or thrown away, but also inspiring a new crop of quilt makers to make new work has been very inspiring to me, but to be able to translate that story to not only Nova Scotia, but to the rest of Canada, said David Woods, Secret Codes curator and BANNS co-founder at the center's spring opening night reception for its art gallery on March 26th. Secret Codes is one of several exhibitions on display at the gallery. The quilts date back to the 1920s. The Woods gathered from Black communities across Nova Scotia. Features original picture quilts from the Vale Quilters Association based on Woods' drawings of Black women and Black community scenes, as well as quilts inspired by the women's own interpretation of Underground Railroad secret code patterns, which were said to be used to help Black people escape slavery in the 18th and 19th centuries. How cool!
That's really interesting.
Very, very interesting.
I mean, yeah, it's just good to share. Like this is art and history and acknowledgement of the people that came before those Nova Scotians and how they had to communicate. And it's a beautiful gallery, and it's worth sharing if you're in the Nova Scotia region. Is it in Halifax?
So it started they said it was on at the Confederation, but the opening night was in Charlottetown. I'm scrolling. I think it might be in Charlottetown right now, but it's in partnership with Nova Scotia.
That's some unique and beautiful artwork.
So it's like across province, and it was actually funded by the Textile Museum here in Toronto as well. So I think it might be making its way. It's making its way across the whole country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Nova Scotia and PEI share a lot of history. In fact, when I was growing up in Nova Scotia, the names Pryor and Byers and Mills were people that had come from here, but we never really knew much about their actual life here. But things like this will help. So it's a whole education piece on the people of those provinces.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the third topic, or do you want to save that for another week?
I'll save that for another week because now I'm out of time. No.
All right.
No, because
Well,
it'll give me more time to I'll the teaser is Hillary didn't know that there were black people in Italy. Just like how in 2016, no, at the age of 16, she didn't know there were white Africans. And I continue to grow and learn. And I'm proud of myself, but I learned a lot and I have thoughts. And I will
that's
educate myself on the things I was saying before about it so that I come here with receipts.
perfect. Okay, well, that's the journey you're on. I'm going to switch the view.
Mhm.
Ooh, ah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in again. If you haven't already, if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Please like our video. It really helps the algorithm. Make sure you also subscribe to us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. TikTok has a lot of amazing content. So check that out. On our audio streaming platforms, obviously like Spotify and Apple, iTunes, and everything like that. If you're listening on there, just please take the time to click the follow button so you'll be notified of new notifications, as well as rate us, give us that 5-star rating. And last but not least, the best way to stay in touch with everything Black Atlantic is to just go to blackatlantic.ca and subscribe to our mailing list, where you'll be, up to date with everything that's Guanan. And that's
Guanin'.
another one. It's
That's
Guanan.
another one.
Let's play the intro. Let's play the outro as the intro. All right. We will see you next week.
Bye.